Okay, welcome to my first tutorial in Blender. Today I'm going to show you how to make a low poly lightsaber. So first thing we're going to want to do is open the Blender program and go to General. Then we're going to want to get rid of our cube and our light. So we select the cube, hit delete, select our light, and hit delete. Now the first thing we're going to want to do is create the base pieces of the lightsaber itself. There are four parts that we're going to create. We're going to create a handle, a pommel, a crossguard, and a blade. When we're creating this, we're going to want to make sure to label everything in our collection. That way we don't get things mixed up and it's easy to tell what we're working on. So let's start with the handle. We're going to go Shift A, Mesh, and select the cylinder. The first thing we're going to want to do is going to get the general shape of the handle. So we're going to go Scale or S, Z, and move our cursor until we have a good shape. Then we're going to want to scale the entire object down so that when we're in camera mode, we can see the whole thing. Let's make this a little smaller. Okay. And we're going to zoom in, and we're going to go into edit mode. In edit mode, we can start with the individual sections of our lightsaber handle. So I think we're going to start with the power button. So we're going to hit 1R number pad to go to the view, and we are going to create two loop cuts. The first one, by hitting Control R, we're going to put right about here. The second one, we're going to put our cursor kind of at this top portion of the handle. Control R, and put it right about here. Okay, now that we have that done, we're going to actually do the power button. Go to Faces mode. Select the middle two by clicking with the left mouse button and then shift left mouse button. Shift left mouse button. And we have our selection. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to kind of move off to the side here so we can see what we're doing. We're going to extrude. That's about far enough. And then we want to make this surface here where it curves flat. So while we have our four faces selected, we're going to hit S, Y, 0 to flatten it out. Now, in order to make this, we have to make an inset, but in order to make sure everything is more or less even, we want to get rid of some of these edges first. So we're going to go to Edge Select. We're going to select this line, this line, this line, then hit X and dissolve edges. That way we have a smooth surface here. We're going to go back to face selection, and we're going to make an inset. Right about there. We're going to go, but this is too narrow, so we're going to go back to line selection. Click here on this line, shift click, shift click, shift click. Then we're going to hit G, Z to move this line up to right about There. We're going to do the same thing down here. Click the line, shift click, shift click, shift click. Now generally, if I say shift click, that means the left mouse button. We're going to hit G, Z, and move that down to about there. Okay. Now we have our face for our power button. We're going to go to face selection mode, select the face, extrude, and we're going to move inward just a little bit. Okay, so there's the basic of our power button, but we want to create some ridges, you know, for the thumb to kind of feel when you're igniting the saber itself. Once again, it's all about the details. So we're going to go Control R. Actually, let's do this without the ridges. Let's inset again, and then extrude outward to give us our power button. Let's extrude that. Control Z. Let's extrude this a little out to give us some more detail there. Alright, there's our power button. Alright, next thing we want to do is we're going to go to number 1 on the pad, number pad, to our view here, and we're going to create our power pack. But what we want to do is we want to have the power pack and the power button kind of on different sides to give it a little more definition. So we're going to hit 3 on the numpad, create another loop cut, and we're going to pull it down here, and then another loop cut right about there. And just like the power button, what we're going to do is we're going to select in face mode the middle, shift left click, and we want the power pack to be a little bit bigger, so we're going to go 1 more on either side. We're going to extrude, and then we're going to go scale X0 to flatten that out. Once again, we have our flat surface here, but what we want to do is we want to get rid of these lines. So we're going to go to Edge Select, click here, Shift click, Shift click, Shift click, Shift click, and then X, dissolve edges. That way we have a flat, smooth surface here. And we're going to go to Faces mode, Face Select, and we're going to inset again right about here. Zoom in so we can see what we're working with here. We're going to go to Edge Select, select that edge, Shift, select all of these edges, GZ. We're going to move it up to about here. We'll select these edges. GZ, which is grab or move, down to about here. Now we're going to go back to face mode, select that face, and this time we are going to extrude out. Okay, there is our power pack. Let's move over to object mode and have a look. Looks good. Now I want to add a little bit more detail to this handle. And the way we're going to do this is with some ridges. What I'm going to do is go back to edit mode. And I'm going to create a loop cut down here. Let's create the loop cut in the middle. And then we're going to create another loop cut here. Create another loop cut here. Actually, let's try this approach. We're going to create a loop cut and then we're going to create several loop cuts in here. Now that we have our basic shape here, what we're going to do here with these loop cuts is we're going to go to face mode, and we're going to select all the faces alternating by hitting Alt and clicking on that line there. Alt Shift click, Shift click, Shift click, and Shift click. All right, now we have our pieces selected. What we're going to do is we're going to extrude, but because we're doing multiple extrusions and we want them to move in the same way, we're going to hit Alt E and select Extrude Faces Along Normals. Now we can move these into the desired point. And we have kind of, this machined look about it. Let's see how that looks. Object mode. Okay, looking good. Okay. Next we want to create a pommel. Go back to numpad 1. We're in object mode. Shift A. And we're going to go with another cylinder. Now, obviously, we have to scale this guy down. And move him down. Now, as I said before, you can see here we've got cylinder 1, cylinder 2. I like to label things. So we're going to call cylinder handle. And cylinder 001, we're going to call pommel. Now, real quick, we're going to have to go into edit mode here in a minute, and we'll have to be able to move between the two, and I'll show you how to do that. First, we want to size this up just right. So we're going to go 7 on the numpad, which takes us to the top view, and then 9 on the numpad, which takes us opposite of that. And we're going to scale down until we have it roughly the same size. Okay, now, before we get started on the pommel, let's go into edit mode. Now we have over here our 2 objects, and in order to switch between the two, we have the dot over here to the left column, click on that and it will go back to the handle. If we want to move back to the pommel, click on that dot and we have the little square here. We're on the pommel. Now what I like to do, I like to make sure that everything kind of fits. Like there's an obvious like design to it where in that one piece connects to the other. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into faces mode, select the top, shift select the bottom, top and bottom of our lightsaber handle, and we're going to make an inset. Once again, because we're moving two faces and we want them to go roughly in a uniform direction, we're going to go Alt E, extrude along normals, and we're just going to drag this down in here. That way we have kind of a indentation where the next piece can fit in. Now, the next thing we're going to do is move over to our pommel and do the same thing with the top piece, the top face, but instead we're going to inset in and we're going to extrude upwards. That way this piece kind of fits into this piece, just like that. Now, the next part is the pommel, and we're going to do some ridges on the outside of the pommel. So I want to go to number 1 view, and I'm going to select these two faces. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip 2. In doing this, I can make sure once again to have in uniformity and not have a gap where there's too much or too little space in between. So we're going to skip 2 and select those 2. Skip 2 and select these 2. Skip 2 and select these 2. Skip 2. And just rotate around until we get all the way back to where we started. Skip 2. Skip 2. And here we are. Back to number 1 on the numpad. And then what I want to do is I want to inset these a little bit. And then we're going to go Alt E, because once again we're moving everything in the same direction. Extrude along normals. And push these prongs out. So we have kind of a cylindrical pommel with the prongs. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go down to this bottom face, and we're going to give it a little bit of detail on the bottom. So what I want to do is extrude. I want to inset, extrude down a little bit, and then I'm going to come back out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit 7 on the numpad, then 9 to take us back down to the bottom. And I'm going to hit E for extrude, and then scale, and bring this out about the same distance. And then I'm going to extrude again and bring this down. Then I'm going to repeat the process. Let's inset again. And then extrude down. then inset again, not inset, extrude, scale, and bring it out to about the same size. And extrude down one more time. We'll give this a little bit of length on the bottom. And there's our pommel. Now, when I was talking about this piece and the inset there and how things fit together, we're going to go ahead and hit A to select our entire pommel, and then use the Move tool to just slide this guy into place. And there's our pommel. Let's see what this looks like in object mode. It's looking pretty good. Okay. Now we're going to create our crossguard. So we're going to go 1 on the numpad again. Move up with our tool here. And we're going to hit Shift A to create, you guessed it, another cylinder. Once again, this cylinder needs to be scaled down. That looks about right. We're going to move this up, hit 7 on the numpad, and scale this down so that it's roughly the same size. Okay. Now we have our cylinder. Go number 1 on the numpad again. Move our tool up here. And I don't want this to be that long, so let's scale on the Z-axis again. We're going to hit S, Z, and kind of move it down a bit. We're going to create kind of like a thin ring there. And then we want to kind of make this, we're going to go to edit mode. We want to make this sort of flange outwards. So what we're going to do is we're going to extrude up to about there. And then we're going to scale it so that it creates that half hourglass shape. Then we're going to, while the top face is still selected, we're going to extrude up again. Now, I kind of like to follow the same style with the lightsaber, going from one side to the other in uniformity. It just, like, symmetrically, it looks nice. You got to consider that this is like a piece of it's electronic equipment. It's a machine, so it just makes sense if it looks symmetrical. We're going to do a very similar outlook to what we had on the bottom here, but instead we're going to go back to number 1 on the view. We're going to select this one, this one, and this one, and this one. Skipping 2 since we have an even number of sides. That didn't work. Alright, we're going to do this the same way as we did before. So we're going to select 2, skip 2, skip 2, and work all the way around again. We're going to go back to the front, and we are going to hit Alt-E, and extrude along the normals, and we're going to move out. I want to give that kind of like a machined look, but sort of almost like a samurai sword. And while we have these faces selected, we're going to go S0. That's not right. We'll leave these flanged out like that. Okay? And then what I want to do is while I have these selected, I want to inset a little bit and extrude a little bit more using Alt-E. Just to give it a little bit more detail. Okay. There basically is our pommel, our crossguard, which we need to label. But once again, we have to have the pieces that fit into the pieces. So I'm going to go to the bottom. I'm going to inset it. And then I'm going to extrude down. Then hit A, select our entire piece. And we're just going to fit it down into place. Like that. Now before we're finished with our crossguard, what we want to do is set up for the blade itself. So we're going to select this top face. Let's inset. Then extrude down. And scale it in to create this bowl. And this is where the blade's going to come out of. So, we're about finished with our cross blade, our cross guard. So let's move back to object mode. Here's our saber. It's looking pretty good. Now we want to create the blade. And to create the blade, this is part of what's so simple about creating a lightsaber in Blender is you're basically using the same object over and over again. So we're going to go Shift A, and we're going to grab another cylinder. Scale this down. We'll go 7 on, actually not yet. We're going to move up here. Then 7 on the numpad, and scale it down to about there. That's just still a little too thick for a lightsaber blade. That looks better. And we're going to move it down into the bowl. There. Now, I don't like to have a lot of extrusions because when you do, let's jump into edit mode. What you get is a bunch of lines. So if I were to extrude, then be like, well, no, I want it to be longer, and then extrude again, then I have that line here, which is going to, well, it's just, I don't like the way it looks. So we're going to Control Z back to the beginning, and with this face selected, I'm going to just move it up until I get the desired length. That looks about right. Now that I have the desired length, I'm going to zoom in on the top here so we can create the edge of the blade. Now, if you've seen any of the Star Wars movies, you know that the lightsaber, at least the newer versions of the Star Wars movies, the lightsaber's got kind of a tapered edge. It's not just a beam. So what we're going to do to taper this edge into a point is we're going to extrude to about here and then scale in as small as we can get it about there. And we're going to name this cylinder Blade. Alright, now we've got all of our pieces put together and in the right spaces. We have our blade, our crossguard, our handle, and our pommel. I'm going to go back to object mode. I'm going to select all the parts. Here we have highlighted the blade, the crossguard, the handle, and the pommel. And then I'm going to right click and I'm going to shade smooth. And that gives it just a kind of a polished look to it. And there we have our lightsaber. Now, the first thing that we want to do after we have this done is, by all means, save. So we're going to go Save As. I'm going to go into my Blender files and call this Lightsaber 2. Now we want to shade and color the lightsaber itself, so we're going to go over to shading. And since we created all this in edit mode, for the most part we're going to be object mode. We can for the most part color things in object mode. So let's start with the handle. We're going to create a new material, and we're going to call this black steel. We're going to select our base color, and you guessed it, it's going to be black. Actually, let's make this just regular steel, because if we do black, we're not going to be able to see some of the details that we created. So let's go with steel. And what I want to do is I want to drag down the color just a little bit to make it kind of a gray. Then we're going to take the metallic up to 1. That kind of gives it that colored steel. And then let's take the roughness down, but we don't want the roughness to be too far down, because if it is, then it'll look a little bit plasticky and less metallic. So let's take the roughness down to 0.25. Okay, there's our steel color. We're going to drag this window down just a little bit so we can see our collection. Now we're going to go to the pommel. I want the pommel to be the same color. So I'm going to select this steel color for the pommel. And I'm going to select the crossguard and select the steel color for that too. Now we're going to go into edit mode and get some of our details going. Remove our layout. Go back to shading and select edit mode and select our handle. This gives us the ability to kind of manipulate it here. And what I want to do is I want to select these pieces in here. So Alt click and then Alt Shift click, Alt Shift click, Alt Shift click, and Alt Shift click. I want to make these a slightly different texture. That way you can see the definition there. So we're going to hit the plus sign to create a new material. And then create this new material. We're going to call this material black rubber. So what I want to do is I want to take on my base color and drop this all the way down to black. And because it's a rubber, we're actually going to take the roughness up to 0.75. And then assign. And you can kind of see some of the definition in there. It's not as shiny as the metallic parts. And it gives it a little bit more definition. And the power pack looks fine, but let's actually change the color of this power button. So we're going to add a new material. And let's make this red. Let's take the color down just a little bit. Darken it up a little bit. And this is going to be a plastic button, so let's drop our roughness down to 0.25. And then assign, and we'll call this button. So now we have our power button here. And we're going to select steel here. We're going to lighten this up a bit. Actually, we're going to leave it the way it is. Okay, so now we have our cross guard. Let's go down our handle. Let's go down to our pommel. Actually, What I want to do is a similar thing here. So we're going to select all of these. And we're going to put the black rubber we'll leave that be. Okay. So we have our handle. We have the little black rubber there in between the spaces. We have our power button. The next thing that we need to do is color our blade. Now that we're in object mode, that looks a little bit more defined. Now, we're going to do something a little bit different with the blade than we did with the rest of the lightsaber. And that is, we're going to use a different type of material. We're going to go ahead and call this blade. And instead of using a principal BSDF, we're going to switch over to an emission. And we're going to change the color. And you can make the color of your saber any color you want, but I think for this one we're going to go with a red lightsaber. So we've got our color. Now we're going to increase the strength. Let's increase it to 10. Now that we have our saber done, we can move back to the layout. And we need to find a way with the missions to kind of set this apart from the color of the power button. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our render properties, and we're going to, of course, click on ambient occlusion, green space reflections, motion blur, and then bloom, which is what gives the lightsaber its glow. And I think what I'm going to do, let's go back to shading for a second. I'm going to lighten this up a little bit. There we go. That way it's kind of an obvious glow and not, just a flat color. And there's our lightsaber. Now, before we go too much further, let's see what it looks like in camera view. Okay, it's still a little big. So, we're going to have to fix our camera anyway. But let's select the lightsaber. And scale it down a little bit. See how that looks. Alright, we're going to have to move our camera, but we can do that here in just a second. Let's go to select the camera. And our transform here, let's zero that out. Zero that out. And zero that out. Let's Zero out the rotation. Now we're going to move our camera back and up. Further back. Okay, change that to a 90-degree rotation. And this is where we're going to be. We're going to move this down a little bit. And it's kind of like, you know, just kind of a trial and error to get it to the right space. Okay, and then what we're going to do is, in order to make sure our saber fits into view, we're going to highlight and select the saber. And we're going to rotate it. Move it up. And over. Now we have our saber in the scene. And I think, select the camera again, we can move forward just a little bit. How about a little bit more? Okay, that looks good. Now we need to create a background for it. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do just a basic background that I use for most of my objects when I'm not trying to create like an environment for it to go in. And there might be another tutorial later on creating a Star Wars looking environment. Let's move the camera up just a little bit. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to, while we're in object mode, we're going to hit Shift A and create a plane. And we're going to move into top view. And we're going to scale this out. Now we're going to go into edit mode. And edge mode. Select that edge. And extrude, right click. And extrude that up. So we have kind of a almost a shadow box, like an environment here on and of itself, a background. But we want to get rid of this scene here because we want this to look a little bit more endless. So what we're going to do is select this scene and right click and bevel edges. We're going to create a bevel here and select the bevel tool, and let's give it 8 segments. Then we're going to go back to object mode and shade smooth, and that's going to give it, if you can see here, kind of an endless look. But everything seems to be muted out because of the color, so we're going to go down to material properties, add new. We're going to call this background. And let's just darken this up a little bit. By creating a darker background, it gives the lightsaber itself something to shine on. And then let's, you know what, let's take the roughness down a little bit to 0.25. That way we've got a little bit of a glare coming off of the blade. Right there. Alright, now we need to light this. So what we're going to do for basic background materials like this, what I like to do is I like to use area lights. It gives you pretty much a solid projection of what direction you want your light going in. So we're going to go add light area. And we're going to call this area 1. Alright, and then we're going to use Z. We're going to move this along the Z axis to create an overhead view, or an overhead light rather. And let's increase the power of this light to 500. We're going to move to our camera view, and we're going to move to render viewport. And that kind of creates a overhead view of the lightsaber itself. We've got a little bit of reflection from the light on the edges here. But let's bylight this thing. When I mean bylight, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 2 lights that are different colors and put them on either side of it to give it a little bit more definition. So we're going to, since we're using the same type of light, instead of creating new ones, I'm just going to duplicate these. So I'm going to go Shift D and then right click. And then I'm going to move this light over here and then rotate it on the x-axis 90 degrees. Rotate on the y-axis 90 degrees. Okay, here we go. I'm going to move it down. To about there. Let's scale it up a little bit. And then we're going to call this area 2. Then I'm going to Shift D, duplicate it, move it over here, rotate it on the y-axis 180 degrees. Now that I have both these lights set up, I'm going to do my bylighting. So I'm going to take this one, and I'm going to make this one a red light. Let's soften that up just a little bit on our color wheel. And then we're going to select our other area light, and let's make this one kind of a soft blue. That way you can see here in the camera view, we've got the red light coming off this direction and the blue light coming off that direction. It allows for a little bit more definition. And we are just about done here. Let's go ahead and save. We have our lightsaber, blade, pommel, handle, and crossguard. We have the blade lit. Let's darken that blade a little bit. Okay. Let's see how that looks. That looks a lot better. All right, and now let's move this bugger out of the way. Here's our lightsaber. Let's render an image and see what we can do here. Let's go ahead and save it because we darkened the blade. And we are ready to render. So we're going to hit render and render image. And here is our lightsaber. We're going to go to image, save as. We're going to save this as a JPEG at 100% and save in the JPEGs. We're going to call this Lightsaber 2. Okay, there is our rendered version of a lightsaber, lit up and colored. And that's a low poly lightsaber for you. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, like and subscribe.